Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Device Talks weekly podcast. It's great to have you back. We have so much to cover in this little short intro. Number one, Paul Grand is back. He is going to be an integral part of Device Talks Boston. His MedTech Innovator program will be a huge part of our innovation and investment track. We'll talk all about that in the podcast. Paul will once again sit in on the Newmarker's Newsmaker session, but we'll also talk about you or about startup CEOs who want to be part of MedTech Innovator and who want to present at Device Talks Boston. It's a great opportunity. So please listen in. You'll find it interesting if you're a startup CEO, and I think you'll find it interesting if you're not, because we talk about a lot of different things going on in the MedTech world, including Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. To that point, I just wanted to direct you to a tweet that I put out today on Friday. A local company, a fishing company called, they sell fish. I buy fish from them, called New England Fishmongers, uncovered a mammoth tooth, a woolly mammoth tooth from the bottom of the seafloor, and they're auctioning it off on eBay. So if you're interested in owning one of those and knowing that all the proceeds will go to benefit Ukrainian refugees, I thought I just would alert the world of my tweet and of this availability. It's kind of cool, kind of unique. So do check it out. But back to our conversations. We'll cover a lot of different things here today, including an article in which Sean Hooley reviewed the top performing medtechs of 2021 per stock price. So I'll include the link to that article in the show notes. I'll also include a link to a webinar I'll be putting on Tuesday, March 15th. It's very short, 10 minutes. If you're interested in being part of Device Talks Boston or any of our Device Talks meetings, just register. You can watch it live Tuesday afternoon. I believe it's 2:00 Eastern, or you can watch it on demand. And it's my giving sort of an overview of what Device Talks is becoming through the power of this podcast, through the power of our other programs. It's going to be a great event in Boston, a great event in Minnesota. And I've already got some great speakers lined up for Device Talks Santa Clara, which is in October. So it's crazy. We're crazy ahead of time there. So again, check it out. The link will be in the show notes, and you can register for that and watch it live or watch it on demand at your convenience. I also want to remind you, it's Friday as I record this, Friday at 5:27 p.m. Eastern, and our early bird rate will only be around for a few more hours. So if you're one of those many people who actually listen to this on Friday night and you're interested in attending Device Talks Boston, you should register right away. You should take advantage of our $100 off early bird rate, and also use the code DTW25, Device Talks Weekly 25, to save 25% off that already discounted rate. You'll save a bundle of money. So make sure you do that. You can also use that code for Device Talks Minnesota. The early bird rate is still in effect there, since that meeting is happening a few weeks after Device Talks Boston. But in any case, even after the early bird rate expires, use that code DTW25 to save 25% off the price. Finally, our guest today is Dr. Sally Saba. She's the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Medtronic. She was the guest on our first episode of Season 2 of Medtronic Talks, which went out this week. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was nice to talk about efforts to make people feel better and feel more included. So I wanted to share it in this podcast episode. So I've kind of given you an abbreviated or abridged version of the Medtronic Talks podcast. So you'll hear the opening music, you'll hear the description. It's really a fun podcast, and we're going to hit upon a lot of critical issues. So if you're not listening to it, you should listen to it. You can subscribe to it. It has its own podcast channel. We don't usually send it out through this podcast channel. So find it on Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. And you can subscribe there, or of course you can find it on devicetalks.com or medtronic.com. So Sally was a treat to talk to. I'm hoping she'll be speaking at Device Talks Minnesota as well, but haven't quite confirmed that yet, but we'll hope. So that's it. Thank you folks for push and play, and let's get this podcast started. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's well, we've got some issues to discuss today. I'm very happy to have back in the booth Paul Grand, the CEO of MedTech Innovator. Paul, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Very good to be here again in the booth. It's really not that crowded in here. It feels nice. You guys got it set up pretty comfortably. I like the lounge chairs now that you guys get set up. This is pretty nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we definitely live a life of comfort. Chris and I, we're catered to. And
I see you brought the hummus and pita plate today, right, Tom? I mean, are those olives there? You got olives?
I appreciate, that you guys have got a healthy set of snacks. I hate when I go into the green room and it's full of donuts, that's not healthcare. So thank you guys for being conscious of that.
We do remove all the green M&Ms though. So we're conscious of that as well.
I did notice.
So, and you also, if folks are noticing a difference in sound, you have an enormous professional microphone in front of you and you sound fantastic, Paul Grant.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I listened to the last time I was in the booth and with you boys, and I was running around and I had to stop and I was like, my God, I sound terrible. I think I sound great. What am I thinking? I got to pull my mic out. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, I like having the professional setup here. I don't know if I can compete with you guys, but.
Well, you are definitely at our level in that regard. So you are back specifically to talk about DeviceTalks Boston, where MedTech Innovator will be a significant part. But before we get into all of that hoo-ha, you didn't get any sleep last night, you said, prior to my pushing record. What the heck, man?
Yeah, can't believe you brought that up. Come on, you guys. That was just us talking in the booth. So yes, look, I mean, the reality is MedTech Innovator. Even though, we talk a lot about being the world's largest accelerator for medical technology, which we are, we're a startup, we're a team of 10 people, at my team. And that's being generous, by the way. And, and then an extended family of 500 or 600 people helping to review applications and judge for us and mentor companies. But my team is pretty small, and we gotta beef that up because, we are literally, as they say, drinking from the fire hose. Over 1,000 companies applied to these events that we have coming up. And I read every single application. And what you're referring to is we have a pitch event coming up in Washington, D.C. on March 23rd, and it's invite only. So don't everybody go rushing to sign up for it. But we have 30 companies that we have to pick for that event. And there were 283 companies who said, I want to pitch in Washington out of all of our applicants. And I have to read every single one of those. And luckily, I'm not exaggerating when I say there's like 400 or 500 other people who've also read those applications and given us their reviews. But then I have to go through and figure out which of, who am I pleasing? Who am I going to, I got to make sure I got enough companies there for each of our corporate partners, for Nipro or for Olympus or for J&J and Beck and Dickinson and so on. I got to make sure they all have somebody to see and meet with, and not just one or two. They got to all have a balance. So we built a whole infrastructure to balance all that out, but I got to read every single application to do that. And so it was an all-nighter for me. But all the invites are out.
I'd say that's an outstanding thing for people to know, though. Like if you don't make the MedTech Innovator cut, I mean, Paul looked at the application. I mean, that's outstanding.
Yeah. And I make notes on the ones that we go, boy, they're just a little bit too early. Like, sometimes we'll have like 3 or 4 of our partners will go, really interested in this. This looks transformative, blah, blah, blah. And I'll look down and I'll go, the company's raised, no money. And, they we have runway through Q1 2022, and I go, it's just too early, or they're still barely at the prototype stage. They have no data, no evidence, and we go, you know what? It's just, guys, reapply next year. So we do tell people to do that. It's not just you get a no from us. So we try to give people feedback too.
That's great.
No, well, it's I worked till about 8:30 on Tuesday night, and I was feeling pretty badass. But now I have to up my game, though. I'm not doing an all-nighter. I'm done with that. No more red eyes. No more all-nighters. I'm past that stage.
I thought I was past that stage too, and here I am. I'm not exaggerating. I do at least an all-nighter every month, at least one. Somewhere there's some major thing. And it's not just that I'm a procrastinator. It's that, as I said, we are just overwhelmed with great companies. and stressing out over not wanting to leave great ones on the cutting room floor. Like, we want to make sure that, I look through everything and go, I don't want to go, we passed on this great company. So, it's super exciting. And boy, you guys are going to be so excited. I mean, we'll talk more about DeviceTalks and what's coming up, but we got some great companies for you in the pipeline this year.
Awesome.
And we got some really passionate, excited people. I actually got my first referral from DeviceTalks, where you guys, not you, Jim, interviewed somebody and then contacted me and said, "Ooh, these guys look really interesting." He introduced me to the company. The company applied that day, and they were like, "We'll be in LA tomorrow if you want."
Wow!
So we got some enthusiastic entrepreneurs, thanks to DeviceTalks.
Wow,
so
this is awesome. This is Jim Hammerand, managing editor of Medical Design and Outsourcing.
That's the man. That's the one.
And that feature story will be posting in coming days on MDO. So keep an eye out for it.
Let's not spoil it then.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk a bit more about DeviceTalks Boston in a moment and MedTech Innovator's role in that. But tell everyone push play because they want to hear what Newmarker's newsmakers are. So let's begin to roll into those 5 big news stories of the week, Chris Newmarker.
The Newmarker's newsmakers. Well, number 5 on the list is Ukraine, which the Russian invasion of the country just continues to slog on. Our senior editor, Danielle Kirsch, has we've now created on MDO a really good just roundup of what all the different medtech and pharma companies are doing in response to the invasion. We'll continue to update that. The title of the article is How MedTech and Pharma Respond to Russia's Invasion of Ukraine. So check it out on MDO. Millions of dollars, all kinds of medical equipment going over there, a lot going on. It's interesting. I mean, one debate that's starting to crop up, and you were just mentioning this to me, Tom, because you're reading a opinion article about it, is, the question of should MedTech and pharma be withholding products to Russia, which, it's one thing if you can't get a Big Mac in Russia because you've got a dictator running your country who's invading people, but it's I'd say another thing if you can't get a pacemaker or needed chemo drugs.
I don't know if this has ever been seriously considered at any of the companies, but the medtech or the pharma companies. But this clearly just, I think in my mind, points out that this is the first true conflict between economies of somewhat similar size, or at least a war with a country that has an economy that's drawing from the U.S. medtech industry. I mean, we're comparing this invasion to World War II. Back in World War II, there was obviously no medtech industry, and every country basically had their own industry or not, and got their supplies from internally. This is really shining a stark light on how far you take sanctions and sort of boycotts. As you said, it's one thing not to be able to get your Big Mac. It's another not being able to get your glucose monitor device, your insulin, or your chemotherapy drugs. I mean, that's going down a path that I'm not sure where we're ready to go down.
And we are seeing a lot of companies definitely offering, aid around this terrible humanitarian crisis going on. But we have seen a few companies say they're stopping to sell stuff to Russia, but it's generally related to more like elective procedures, which that can make more sense. Okay. So, all right, you're in Russia, you can't get a super duper knee surgery now because of the kind of government you have right now.
That would seem to be the line I would draw. Paul, I'm not sure if you've given any thought or had any conversations around, if not this topic specifically, just what's going on with the Ukraine.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of our CEOs in the MedTech Innovator portfolio the other day, and she's Russian and was telling me a lot about her thoughts on the conflict and having family in Ukraine, and then also just what it was like to grow up in a free Russia versus what it is today, and how all that happened and what might be likely to happen. And I think, what our conversation was really trying to get to is what's the impact on our industry and how can our industry help and what should our industry be doing? And I think ultimately it is a lot of what you guys were already saying, right? I think it's that everybody should be taking a stance to say, like, this is not acceptable. Because if there's that quote someone said, I can't even remember who it was, but there's a quote where someone said, like, if you don't speak up in the face of a bully, then you're on the side of the oppressor. And I think everybody should be speaking up and letting everyone know that you're not on the side of the oppressor, that you don't condone what's happening. And then it's a question, as you said, of what do you do about it? And is it aid, or can you take the extreme of cutting things off? And in the case of, life-saving medical therapies, I don't know how you deprive human beings as a humanitarian, of life-saving medical therapies. You can't turn off that pacemaker suddenly. But as you said, if it's something that's more elective, it's something that you say, hey, this is optional. You lose that right now. We're certainly cutting off supply where you can, using them as suppliers. But the world is so flat these days. And I think that's what we all have to appreciate, right? Is that it's not their problem. It's our problem for sure. It's not like, oh, that's just Ukraine. That's a faraway place. And, whatever, they'll figure that out. That is not the case. What's happening there is affecting us. I literally have people in my portfolio who told me this week that their programming teams are like literally in Ukraine, fleeing, like heading with their families to a train station and stopping to take investor phone calls along the way. Talk about commitment, and like literally going like, they're like, we're fine. We're totally fine. And in fact, that's the one last thing I'll comment on this, is that the attitude that I've heard now from several people who have family in Ukraine is that everything is going to be fine. And that they're strong and they're fine, and don't worry about us, kind of things, which from our side looking in, I don't even understand that. Yeah. But that seems to be a very strong, united, group of people, 40 million people in Ukraine who feel very confident that they're going to win. And we have to kind of think about that, in terms of how they're acting and what they're doing. And anyways, I'm crazy concerned about it. And, anything we can do as an industry to help, I think we should be doing.
I mean, definitely the bravery and tenacity of the Ukrainian people it's inspiring, and it's obviously inspired, the free world and companies in the free world to stand up.
But I do think people should be commenting about it. I think people should be saying this is not okay, and we're not standing for this, and we're going to do whatever we can to to help. And I think that's ultimately, I think everybody just wants to hear some kind of public comment, that people shouldn't be silent is I think the point. Because that silence is as I said, that silence is acceptance, and none of us should be accepting of this.
Yeah, we've seen some comments. I know Jeff Martha Medtronic issued one, and within his statement stated that we have to remember that our Russian coworkers, also deserve our attention, and we need to understand where they're coming from. So there's a lot of complexity to this. And you're right, Paul. The flat earth is exactly what I was trying to say. It's just such a different world than it was 50, 60, 80 years ago. And it's really fascinating to see a tragic attack like this, how it plays out on a global sense and how it impacts everything. So, I guess the answer would be continue to provide the care and the supplies, and maybe the revenue made from that is diverted to support the Ukrainians and help save them now and rebuild them in the future. I think we're going to continue to turn the knobs until we find the right solution.
And one last thing I'll point out, be sensitive to the fact that all of us probably know somebody who's Russian or Ukrainian, who may be employees of ours or friends of ours, and their families are now targets. Yep. In the same way that people were attacking, Chinese people and saying the virus you caused the virus. The Russian population and the Ukrainian Russian population in particular, here in the U.S., kids are getting bullied, people are getting threats. Yep. The Russians are suddenly, are the bad guys again, and it's a huge Russian population here, and as I said, there are employees, there are friends, and we have to figure that they're that they're going through a lot right now.
Absolutely.
So you got to separate
point.
what the government of Russia is doing, versus the Russian people. I mean, those are two very different things.
Yeah, but they're hard for little kids to figure out.
Yeah.
You got little kids, and it's like cowboys and Indians again. All of a sudden,
Yep.
bad guys and good guys, and they're like, oh, these Russians, you guys are terrible. So, anyways, it's just there's so many levels to be thinking about here.
I had that kind of conversation with my 12-year-old son this morning, just about I just asked him, I'm like, how do you feel about everything? He's like, I'm a little scared. Like, I know what that feels like. Let me tell you. So yeah, talk to your kids, everybody.
Well, on we go from that, right? So number 4 on the list, we've this was actually interesting and got a really good amount of hits on Mass Device. It's a incubator called Big Sky Biomedical, and they just recruited in Dr. Ryan Egeland, which, I mean, you've spoken with him in the past, Tom. I mean, Egeland was the chief medical officer at Cardiovascular Systems, here in the Twin Cities,
yep.
and used to be a Medtronic Rhodes Scholar. I mean, just really an impressive recruit into this incubator. So some good news for them.
Ryan's a super nice guy. I worked with him. He was at Medtronic at the time when I was working on another conference, and I had him on my previous podcast, and he was a big help in sort of helping to put that program together. So this is interesting that it got so many hits. I mean, I guess people like incubators, Paul Grant. That's kind of
people do like incubators. Hey, look, Ryan, I was just looking back, and Ryan weighed in back in December of 2016 on a survey we were doing at the time of the industry when he was at Medtronic, and we were saying, hey guys, what things are important to you? And Ryan gave us his input on what he saw at Medtronic as being important for the themes we should be targeting at MedTech Innovator. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Ryan, for that. And I'm glad he's got an incubator that he's part of, because incubators are really the great feeders to MedTech Innovator. So thank you, because we basically reach out to, I'm not exaggerating, like 1,000 incubators and accelerators around the world and say, send us your best companies, because we can put them on the big stage at places like DeviceTalks. Not that I want to spoil, but yeah, I mean, that's what we, that's what we do. So we can give them, we could give these companies national attention, and I applaud Big Sky on making that hire. That's really good, because what these entities need are experts.
Exactly.
They really do. And a lot of them have, I'm sorry to say, a lot of the local incubators do not have experts. They have people who understand how to run an acceleration program or incubation program, but they're generic, and they don't know anything about medical products. So I'm glad to see Big Sky does.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like some of the names associated with the incubator, and they got some names of people we know. So that's a good thing.
Well, I've already reached out to Ryan, so hopefully we'll have him on the podcast someday, and ideally he'll be involved with DeviceTalks Minnesota, which is happening on June 6th and 7th in Minnesota.
Sounds like a plan.
Speaking of conferences, Paul Grant, you and I are working on DeviceTalks Boston together. You are, for those who don't know, our DeviceTalks meetings are broken up into multiple tracks, all covering different aspects of medical device development. First being innovation and investment. And MedTech Innovator is going to be a big part of our innovation and investment track in Boston. Paul, you have a great plan for how many startups are you going to be bringing into Boston on May 10th?
We will be bringing 30
Woohoo!
world-class startups.
All right.
They'll be presenting May 10th and 11th, correct?
Correct.
We'll try to break them up over the 2 days in some capacity. But so you're here specifically, number one, because you're super charming. Number two, because you're willing to do this. Number three, because you're smart and informative of the medtech industry. But primarily, the reason you're here is you have yet another deadline coming up for DeviceTalks Boston, correct?
I do, yes. So as you just said, Tom, we're going to be featuring 30 companies at DeviceTalks. That means 30 companies you guys get to present to that unbelievable audience that they've assembled, 500 or so, whatever number of people who will be there to partner with, to meet with, to maybe to invest in you, and so on. So we've got an opportunity for 30 startups to present at the DeviceTalks conference, and at the same time to be in the running for MedTech Innovators Accelerator. And specifically, the companies we're looking for this opportunity are only companies that are what we call mid-stage companies. These are the companies that have raised generally a Series B, maybe a Series C already. A lot of them are already in the market in some way. They're certainly clinical. We have some companies that, have raised a $40 million Series A. Okay, fine. They'll be acceptable. If they're, and again, not that dollar amount means anything. I'm just saying if they've raised a lot, we'll certainly consider them. The point is we're looking for more mature companies for this particular opportunity. And you have until March 31st to apply at medtechinnovator.org/apply.
That's great. And the application it's all online? Does it require any of the materials, or is it all just something someone can fill out wherever they are?
So we request a pneumatic tube be filled and launched. No, all online, Tom. Yes, all online.
You send them back a sucker after they send that through to you. That's
yes,
great. It's nice.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, you put your palm on it. It's that.
I will rephrase the question, Your Honor.
All online.
Do you need any supporting materials? Is it something someone can do in a plane?
Yes, they do have to add supporting materials minimally on top of our admittedly robust application. We do ask a lot of questions. We ask for a deck, a non-confidential PowerPoint, PDF, whatever you want to attach, but we've got to have that. Some people attach videos and letters of support and all sorts of things. We'll read all of it. As I mentioned, I was up all night and I will be again. But the point is, we do need that. What we're looking for is that we want to see some evidence. We want to see that you've got something interesting and that it's going to work. You've got some evidence that it's going to work. It could be animal data, lab, bench data, it could be cadaver data, it could be human data. And I think for the companies that are going to be presenting at DeviceTalks, it will be some human data. It's not enough. And by the way, we sit around at this event with 70 judges. So we will have 70 of our corporate partners, investors, clinicians, and others at that event at DeviceTalks, meeting with all these companies. And they will expect you to sit down and not just show a slide that says diabetes is a problem, and we've built a device to solve that, and where it's an implantable and blah, blah, blah. That's not enough. Like we want you to say, and we've done a clinic, and they go, and we've done 2 clinical studies. Okay, and how are they? You'd be surprised how many people don't tell you how the clinical studies went. They go, we've done 2 human trials. All right, how have they gone? What can you tell us? Obviously, if you're in the middle of a randomized controls trial that you can't unblind, that's one thing. But I'm just saying, if you have some evidence, we want to know that there's some proof. Investors and others want to know there's a little bit of evidence that this is going to work. So anyways, that's what we need.
Sounds good. And what's the date again, Paul? What's the deadline?
That would be March 31st, Chris Newmarker.
March 31st. All right.
March 31st at midnight, because we will get those emails from people saying, what time on March 31st? March 31st at midnight Pacific time, to be very specific, as long as you get your application in there, basically before the beginning of April. We'd like to have your application so that we have time to pick the companies and invite them to fly to Boston, because most of them won't be from Boston.
So if you're in Boston and it's 2:30 a.m. on April 1st, you still have 30 minutes to get it in.
You're confusing the people, Chris Newmarker.
No, it's just you got to get it in by midnight, people.
Just get it in by midnight. Give Paul Grand a chance to sleep, people.
That's right. And as they say, right, Paul needs to sleep.
Exactly.
Get the applications in. As they said in my old drum and bugle corps days, like to be early is to be on time is to be late is to be left. So get those applications into Paul here.
Do not get left, folks.
I think it's just great that those who submit, you're already getting out there. Your application is out there and getting reviewed by not just Paul Grant in the middle of the night pumping down some coffee and some Red Bull, but your network of advisors and experts as well are taking a look at these things. So it's very wide exposure.
Oh, we've had major companies who I cannot necessarily name here on the podcast, major companies who you guys know very well and you've had on the podcast, who have gotten funding from strategics because they read their application on MedTech Innovator. And they, in the first year, we didn't even invite them to pitch. Like they just read the application. They're like, I'd never heard of those guys. We should get, our BD team should get, in touch with those guys. All of our corporate partners are using MedTech Innovator as a sourcing vehicle. And from J&J on down, they will tell you that, it's their internal team and MedTech Innovator that they use for sourcing. And that's most of the major MedTech companies. And so, yes, just applying gets you on the radar of people who need to know about you.
Very cool.
Really excited to be working with you on DeviceTalks Plus. We'll talk a little bit later about the pitch competition that will be going on during the event. But Chris Newmarker, I'm dying to know what number 2 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers list. Oh, no, we're number 3?
We're at number 3.
Dying to know what number 3 is. I'm also dying to know what number 2 is. But what's number 3?
Let's start with number 3. Well, number 3, our associate editor, Sean Hooley, produced a story on Mass Device called These 10 MedTech Company Stocks Performed Best in 2021. He looked at the stocks of all of our big 100 companies that are included in our MedTech 100 index. And he looked at their stock performance last year, have a list of companies that, performed especially well last year with their stock prices. Any guesses who made the list?
Yeah, Paul Grant, can you name all 10 and how large their increase was? Can you go?
Ready? All right. By the way,
Well, wait, we want them to read the article.
Read the article. I don't want to spoil the article, so I'm not going to spoil the article. But I will say this: number 1 and number 2 on the list are MedTech Innovator corporate partners. I'm not saying that's a direct correlation. Right? Number 1 and number 2.
Coincidence, perhaps.
It could be a coincidence. It may not be a correlation, but I will tell you number 1 and number 2 on the list of the top companies are MedTech Innovator corporate partners, and that's all I'm saying.
And I will tell you number 7 and number maybe 4 will be represented at DeviceTalks Minnesota. So,
I would say like a lot of these companies that their stock performed especially well. I mean, one theme I thought I saw here was innovation. I mean, these are companies that are really, pushing the boundaries in their spaces. And so, yeah, innovation's good for business. I mean, like just to name one, Dexcom. I mean, they've got their, G7 that's coming out this year. Just this really nice, tiny, continuous glucose monitor. I mean, their stock was up, 45% last year. So, I mean, just amazing. So, those are the type of companies that really made this list.
Yeah, Dexcom, corporate partner for MedTech Innovator, folks.
There you go.
Regarding Dexcom, I can't remember a more exciting year for glucose monitor and for diabetic products. It's really been something to watch. So great stuff.
This year, it's really taking off. There's so many products, and Sean, who takes a lead on posting stories for our drug delivery business news. He's really been just covering the heck out of the space. It's really cool to see.
Dexcom also, by the way, just started their venture fund. So they have a dedicated venture fund as well, and they're looking for new technology, folks. So Dexcom Ventures, just saying, they're out there for sure.
Look at that. That's a nice little tidbit for folks in this space. So, all right. Good stuff, Paul.
So number 2 on the list, we've got Medtronic Innovative Surgery's SPAC deal is off. I mean, when they announced this deal last year, it's going to create a company worth more than $1 billion. But the deal is now off. Mutual decision between them and the special purpose acquisition company. And, they cited market conditions and associated volatility due to recent world events, which I think we know what that is. This is starting to turn into a trend. I mean, usually my rule is you got to have 3 to make it a trend, but we've had this. We had Heartflow last month, calling off their SPAC deal. I think we're going to see more of these.
Oh, are you asking me? I'll join in. Yeah, I think
sure.
I think we will see more of these. Yes. There's definitely, look, and just in general, not just SPAC deals being called off. I think public offerings are going to be things that, in a volatile stock market, people don't like going public. So SPAC or otherwise, I think these things are going to be, we're going to be seeing more.
Yeah, I mean, it's been neat to see all these younger companies go public in the last year or two through this mechanism. But yeah, at least for now, until the world hopefully settles down a bit, we might be seeing less of these announced, and seeing some of the deals that we wrote about getting called off. So we'll see what's next.
It'll be interesting to see at DeviceTalks Boston. We'll have John Norris of Silicon Valley Bank. John is the definitive source on fundraising data. He issues a report I think every half, right? He's now doing halves, but it's been such a amazing couple of years for MedTech financings. We'll see if he'll have some information about the first quarter and the slowdown. So we'll talk with John at DeviceTalks Boston. He'll be there on May 11th, and Paul and Chris, I think I'll join him up on stage and maybe have a little bit of a roundtable conversation.
Sounds great.
See where things are going.
John is my go-to source for funding data. That is for sure. I thank him and his team for the great work they do. All
right, Chris Newmarker, what is number one? This is actually kind of a new. We don't have a lot of these on the Newmarker.
No, and this is a surprise to me too. But it's a space we don't cover as much. But Alcon launched their Clarion intraocular lens in the United States, and this is beginning a ton of hits on mass device, which I think this indicates that this is like a significant, this matters, what they're doing here. And, this lens, they're saying this has like the lowest levels of haze and subsurface and nanoglistenings compared to their, competitors, and this is offering, sharper, crisper vision. So it looks like this is an advance in this space of intraocular lenses for people who need new ones to improve their vision. So good. Looks like good news from Alcon, and like our readers are very interested in it. I mean, do you have any insights on this, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this. First of all, vision care in general is definitely hot. There's a lot of startups out there. So we have kind of a unique lens when you get thousands of people.
Oh, I use the word lens. There you go.
What's coming? Thank you, folks. Thank you for noticing that, Chris. See what I did there? So we have that unique lens, and we see a lot of companies in the vision space, and I have a company pitching in DC on March 23rd that has a competitor to this product. So there's definitely a lot of interest and a lot of innovation in this space, and I guess that's why it's number one on the DeviceTalks weekly Chris Newmarker's Newsmakers.
And definitely, our analytics, looking at like what our readers are, clicking on and checking out, that informs our coverage decisions. So this is obviously a space we'll be looking at more because it's, as you said, it's hot. People are interested in what's going on, and it looks like there's some cool advances going on.
Yeah, look, I mean, quality of life is everything, right? And vision is a big part of the quality of life that we all have. And all these technologies for, better, for better vision, for not having to wear contact lenses, for accommodating IOLs, for eliminating cataracts, you name it. Like there's just so many things out there that increase quality of life because, I don't know about you, but I want to see. I want to see clearly. So
as someone who has to keep reading glasses around the house, it sounds like a plan to me. It sounds good.
Yep. Yeah. And the drug industry hasn't put us out of business yet. There's all those companies working on eye drops to try and do similar things. But I think these devices are here to stay.
Well, there was cool news in the space just the other week, like J&J announcing a lens that exuded antihistamine, to help relieve allergy problems with contact lenses. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
There's a lot you can do on that platform, and the eyes are like the window into the brain and into the bloodstream and all sorts of stuff. So you can diagnose all sorts of things to the eye. You can, and it's a really cool platform. So
I remember there was a lot of stuff a few years ago about smart contact lenses, and then that kind of just. I don't know. Is that going to come back? Or are we going to?
They're still out there. They're still out there. They're still developing. They're still getting funded. There's a whole bunch of companies, but the big ones, the Google and all those, some of the projects, that we've read about, some of those are not taking off as fast as I think some people thought they would. But they'll be there eventually. They'll definitely be there. It'd be better than wearing those that huge headset I have to wear with my Oculus. Not that I mind it, but boy, I'd rather just, be able to just have some contact lenses that let me see the whole metaverse without, walking around with the gigantic thing on my head.
So before we get into this week's interview, Paul, I mentioned it earlier on, we'll have the pitch contest at DeviceTalks Boston. This is an opportunity for actually the audience to make those decisions, to serve as your advisory board, I guess. How does that all work? Who gets to pitch on stage in the contest, and how are the winners picked?
All right. So as I mentioned, there's 30 companies that will be invited to present at DeviceTalks, and also to meet with all of our corporate partners and investors and clinicians and regulatory professionals and others, reimbursement, market access experts, all sorts of people. And they will choose 5 companies to get up on the stage at DeviceTalks on the second day, on the 11th. And those companies will each get to present, and then the DeviceTalks audience will pick the winner. So, in real time on your cell phone, you will vote for the winner and choose who gets a prize. We haven't yet announced what that prize is, but I will just tease that it's going to be a good one. And so that company will get, both the kudos of being able to say, hey, the DeviceTalks industry audience chose me as the most compelling mid-stage company, which is pretty cool, because as I said, there could be 30 amazing companies that we will have in the running. So all 5 that'll be on stage will be terrific, as I'm sure will all 30, but only one of them is going to get to win. And they'll be able to get some pretty good bragging rights and a prize, which we will announce in the coming weeks. So as we get a little closer to this, but it's going to be a good one, folks. And there's something that makes me happier, by the way, when I see one of our companies the other day, Epitel, got an investment from Dexcom Ventures, amongst other people. And they have a seizure diary technology, like a little sensor you put on your head and it records your seizures. And they sent out a press release and a blog post. And in the blog post was a big picture of their logo. And on the table was their MedTech Innovator trophy in the picture.
That's fantastic.
MedTech Innovator. And
awesome.
I was flattered they chose to do that, but those are not participation trophies, folks. These are hard-won awards. These companies were chosen out of thousands, and it's a big deal to be picked. So a lot of credit probably comes along with being a MedTech Innovator graduate.
Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome to our second season of Medtronic Talks. In our first season, we spoke with the leaders of Medtronic's operating units to better understand the direction of each of the businesses. Now, with their courses set and clear, we're going to talk to the engineers, scientists, physicians, and other experts who are executing on these strategies. We'll still keep a tight focus on each of Medtronic's businesses, but we are going to get a lot deeper into these stories. Let's go. Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the Medtronic Talks podcast. Yes, as I said at the top, this is season 2. This is episode 1 of season 2. Happy to connect with Sally Saba. Sally is the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Medtronic. She joined 2 years ago, March 2020, which of course was an appropriate time to be joining the company. As Sally will explain, Medtronic had some efforts underway, but certainly the issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity became even more poignant with the killing of George Floyd. So we will talk about that. We'll talk about Sally's own history. We'll talk about what it feels like not to be included. And also we'll review some concrete steps that Medtronic has taken and some results that it's seeing. So it's great to have Sally Saba on the program. It's great to kick off season 2 of Medtronic Talks. As I said at the top, we will be talking with the professionals who are making Medtronic go. They're the ones working with patients, working with technologies, really executing on the plans that we talked about last year. So again, this is a great opener for season 2, really sets the stage on Medtronic's culture, and really, really happy to have you back listening to the Medtronic Talks podcast. Well, Sally Saba, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tom. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this conversation. I've been following your story since you joined Medtronic. I know we talked to you last year for a profile in our Medical Design and Outsourcing magazine. So it's great to be able to talk to you directly. Okay, so we normally begin these conversations, well, at the beginning. We'd like to find out about the guest's background. But for the sake of this conversation, I'd like our listeners to understand your responsibilities at Medtronic. Can you tell us about your position? What is it you do, and how do you interact with others at the company?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I am the Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer for Medtronic. and I joined in March of 2020. My role and responsibility includes strategy, design, and build to execute on a business strategy for advancing Medtronic's progress on issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity within our organization and outside of it. And that includes building in accountability and governance models. It includes inspiring change within our organization and outside. And it includes advancing our own education and understanding of what all this work entails and what it takes to get there.
Excellent. And I know you compile a report that I imagine brings a level of accountability and of measure, and we'll get into your report a little later in the podcast. But you mentioned the timing. It was March 2020. Of course, 2 months later, there was the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and that really set a movement in the MedTech industry, but other industries as well, to really have other companies look inward like Medtronic had been doing. How has your role there, or has your role there changed at all from that time on? Did that accelerate what you were trying to do? Did it change course at all? How did things change after that event?
Absolutely. It definitely changed for any chief diversity officer in corporate America. The cool thing for me was I joined a company who had already been on this journey for a really long time and had a very, very strong foundation in its inclusion and diversity work. When I joined, this movement happened that was, to the word you mentioned is accelerate. It was an accelerator of how we then move from where we had been to leap forward to a completely new level. It was easier to add the context that we now have, which is equity, to the journey that, Medtronic had been on for a while. So it was an accelerator for sure. It put a spotlight on this work on a global scale like no time in history before. And I think it emphasized for companies this new paradigm that companies live in right now, which is it's no longer enough for an organization to make profit and exist to perform for shareholders, but it's a refinement of the concept that companies live and breathe in a context that is political, social, and economic. And that matters now to how companies interact with and uphold value for and by their stakeholders, not just their shareholders.
No, it certainly is. I think companies and content creators like myself, I think we all looked at what we were doing and whether we were representing the world well enough. So I imagine, to your point, it made us all more receptive toward conversations like the ones you wanted to have. I'd like to kind of now go back, if we could, and just kind of follow your path to this place. It's certainly, as you mentioned, many companies have a position like yours, and it's perhaps developed into a career track for young people who want to move into this field. I'm sure it has, but it hasn't always been the case. So I'd be curious as to how you found your way here. Let's go back to first, how did you find your way into the medtech industry? Because you're a physician to begin with, correct?
Absolutely. Yes, I am. And it's really interesting because I would have never thought 30 years ago that this is where I'd be. I never designed that I would be here. It's a stumbling of sorts through career opportunities. So yes, I was born in Cairo, Egypt, and I went to medical school there. I left medical school to change the system of medicine in my humble little youth, where I thought I could, change the world in some sorts. So I've always had an affiliation for healing, for what medicine is all about and what the healthcare industry is all about. From when I was a child, really, Tom. I had a personal story, if it's okay for me to share.
Absolutely.
I was born in Egypt to a family that didn't value female and males equally. And so when I was born female, I was actually left behind by my family because I didn't come out a boy. And I think that shaped in me over time a deeper understanding of how the sense of lack of belonging or feeling like you are valued for who you intrinsically are really matters to human beings. So I carried that with me throughout my career. I did go to medical school, and then I left medicine and went into business for many years. And then as I, moved to the United States in 2003, I re-engaged in the medical field again. And I really seriously stumbled into this work because I joined a large organization, Kaiser Permanente at the time. And I was on the business side. I was in recall and stuff like that. And then they had a program, supplier diversity. They needed to uplift that a little bit and do something with it. And that was my first step into the diversity space. What I learned on that journey just lit up a fire in me around the need for why this work matters and how companies can really have an impact in the lives of people from a personal health perspective and from a corporate responsibility and understanding of the implications of this perspective.
I'd love to just drill down into that moment where you sort of realize you're doing the work that you were meant to be doing. And I'm putting words in your mouth a bit, but I hope it captures it a bit. It seems as if the story you tell as a child, as terrible as it is, I imagine that leaves an imprint on you where I find that the people who are left out are often the most interested in ensuring that other people aren't left out. At least I hope that's the case if they're kind people. Do you feel that that's the case, that your childhood experience left this imprint in you, that you want to commit your life to bringing everyone as much as possible in?
Absolutely. Often people, when they ask me, what's your interpretation of this work? I simplify it into, it's kind of healing the consciousness of corporations, of companies. Employees, the more you understand what drives an employee, the more you understand that their perceived value of how the organization and their colleagues value them, respect them, treat them with fairness, see them, allow their voice to be heard, is the most critical driver of our health and our human behavior and our innovation within companies. Inclusion is a topic that's really, really complex because the petri dish in which you create the opportunity for people to thrive because you've created a space that is safe, that they feel valued, that they feel that they are contributing to their fullest extent and not wasting any of their energy, Tom, on covering up or on trying to assimilate or on hiding the things that they don't think are acceptable within the corporate environment. I like to explain that a little bit further to people in terms of, maybe I can ask you this question. Can you think of a time when you were excluded in your life?
Certainly in school, there are moments where you feel left out. And I think every time I go into a new setting, be it was high school or college, I automatically felt I wasn't excluded because I wasn't included. I felt like the fact that others knew each other or moved more easily through the world and could engage people more easily, and I couldn't, you almost felt like you were actively being left behind. So there are certainly times where I felt excluded, whether I was actually told to leave or not be part of this. Fortunately, I don't have memories of that, but I certainly have memories of feeling quite alone and feeling like others weren't alone.
Yes. And so if you remember that point in your life, could you give me 3 words that explain what emotions were elicited in you?
I think you're frustrated with yourself because you want to be included and you want to be like the others who are moving through life more easily. You're certainly scared that you're not going to find a way in, even though you usually do. You're certainly uncertain whether that's going to happen. Scared and frustrated are good ones, but I think you're lonely. I mean, you're isolated. You're not making that connection that I think humans need. It can be very crippling and it can keep you from doing good work or doing good schoolwork or living a healthy life.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for sharing that because I know that required a little more vulnerability on your side. So thank you for engaging in that. The words that you shared, Tom, are very powerful ones: frustration, fear, being scared, and loneliness. And I would ask you and everybody watching to ask themselves, what if your constant, ongoing state of living and being were in chronic experience of those emotions? Research, I see the look on your, Research has actually proven that those type of emotions of exclusion create long-term health implications on people with stress, anxiety, being overweight, diabetes, and the list goes on. The question I would ask you then is, do you think you would do, if you are an employee of a company and you are feeling those emotions, would your best thinking come through?
I wouldn't think so, no. I think you'd have a lack of trust in yourself. I think you'd have a lack of trust in your colleagues to sort of, if you had an idea, you didn't want to throw it out there as good as it might be because you didn't want to be judged and even make the rift between you and others wider. I don't see an upside to feeling that way at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So that kind of brings us back to this notion of, if we can create environments where people are not feeling those emotions constantly, where people of color and under, sexism, racism, any other ism that is in a workplace or in our communities, we dismantle those things and allow for people to live in a culture and an environment that does not have those emotions of exclusion. That is the time in which you are really opening up to people's brilliance, to people's engagement, to people's offering of their ideas and solutions to problems in a free-flowing state of contribution and engagement. That is what inclusion is all about in the context of diversity, inclusion, and equity.
That's fascinating. And I love the use of the term healing. So many people we talk to on this podcast and in MedTech, part of their industry, because they want to heal others outside the company, patients. They want to create devices that make people physically better. It occurs to me that in your description, you're doing much of the same thing, but for those who are in the company and who are actually doing that. It's an accurate and nice way to present it. And I think it's not often seen that way. Inclusion can often, unfortunately, be seen as something that's put upon others, when in fact you're trying to just sort of create a healthier atmosphere for all. And I'm kind of, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I love that take. So you moved to Medtronic in 2020, and we can keep talking about this, but you mentioned there was already work being done at the company. What did you find in place, and what sort of tools does a company need to have to create that healing?
Well, I found a lot of stuff. First of all, I even shared this with the CEO and the CHRO. It's like Medtronic was this like hidden gem. It's doing all this work, and where have they been? How are we not telling our story more loudly? Medtronic actually, many years prior to me and under the former CEO, Amar Ishrak, started on a journey of making sure inclusion and diversity at the time, because we brought in equity later, but inclusion and diversity were treated just like any other book of business, so to speak. They enacted goals. They put together foundational programs for development for, different populations. They set up employee resource groups and networks. They set up a governance structure for managing the accountability for this work through quarterly diversity reviews and so forth. So all of those mechanisms were in place prior to me joining. So I didn't need to bring any of that, which is where a lot of other CDOs and the rise of CDOs after 2020 are still starting from. So that foundation is really, really strong, because you asked what are the elements that a company needs to have in order to advance this work. You need CEO commitment. You need to make sure that you have accountability measures throughout your organization and that you have specific things you're measuring over time. The organization had set goals in 2015, representation goals, to meet them in 2020, and they did for both gender and for ethnic diversity. As I hope you see in our inclusion diversity report, we've set another set of goals now between this year and another 5 years from now for women in management and for ethnic diversity in management as well. But those foundational elements were there. And what we did after that in 2020 is we really looked at, we were centered upon ourself and our workforce. And what 2020 helped crystallize for us and most every company out there is it's no longer enough for an organization to only look at its workforce and what it's doing for itself within itself. The need for organizations to look at themselves and their impact on the communities around them was more pronounced and accelerated than ever. And that was the impetus for us actually changing and codifying a new strategy that has three prongs. It has three pillars, we call it, which is, being accountable role models individually. So what should we as each individual do? And then ingraining this into our DNA, how do we make ourselves as a company that this is within our fabric? It's in our DNA through and through. And then how do we amplify our impact beyond our four walls? Those are the three pillars now for our new strategy. And those were codified based off of what we had known from before, this need to accelerate now and do more faster in this space going forward. And that's how we've organized our work now. And that's where our strategy is in terms of its big pillars.
So let's get into the report if now is a good time to do it, because it sounds as if that's where you're tracking your progress. And I would love to understand how you do quantify progress in this, because it's one thing for me to seize upon the term healing, but we're not talking about a broken bone where you can x-ray it and see it compare it from now to 2 weeks ago. How are you measuring success at Medtronic?
We measure success in a lot of different ways, but we look at the problem also in different ways. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about how we look at the issue, because then how we look at the issue informs how you solve for the problems. The Racial Equity Institute, many, many years ago, came up with this metaphor to explain to people, if you're going to be on this journey of equity and diversity, inclusion, and so forth, here's a way in which to think about it. It's interesting because it talks about lakes, and we're in Minnesota, so I'm going to use it. So it says, if you walk outside and you live on a lake and you see a fish come up dead in the lake, what you'd naturally do is you'd examine the fish. You'd say, why did this one fish die? So let's say extrapolate that into your work environment or into an education system, and you go, okay, why did this one employee not succeed or not get promoted? Or why is this one student not doing well in school? But if you walk outside to your lake and you find half of the fish came up dead, you would say, oh, well, let me examine the water. What's happening in the environment around this population of students or fish that I need to address. But if you have 5 lakes in front of you or more, and you come outside and every lake has 50% of its fish belly up dead, you start looking into what you call the groundwater. You look at what are the systemic things in the system that are rigged against certain population of every system that makes it that these specific fish are the ones that are dying no matter which space they're in. So when you extrapolate that to equity or the agenda of equity in America, or how you look and address these issues, you want to first understand that it affects systems at whole. You look at within your organization, what makes people not advance at the same rate. You look at in your communities, who's getting access to education and who's not. You look in your small business and you say who's getting access to capital and who's getting business or not. The notion of the metaphor is to help you understand you've got to look deeper and you've got to look systemically at things in order to measure whether or not you're making progress and in order to know what are the things you want to tackle. And the reason I personally like that, because when you train as a physician, you train to diagnose. Your shoulder pain, if you go and you just try to fix the shoulder, it might be probably from your heart because there's, deferred pain. So you learn to diagnose deeper to understand what's really at the root cause of an issue. So we as a company and many, many other companies, but at Medtronic, we measure this in clear things. We measure, is our talent moving up the chain equitably? If you have X% at the bottom, is that X% represented at the top? You look at if people are applying at a certain percentage, are they making it through into jobs at that same rate? You look at when I'm spending money external to Medtronic, am I doing my part in giving a portion of my business to small and women and minority-owned businesses? You look at what role am I playing in increasing minorities and women in STEM programs? So we look at that collective. We look at how are we doing in terms of numbers. We look at how are employees feeling through our own People Pulse surveys, our own organizational health surveys and so forth. The stories we're telling, how are people really engaged or not? And then we look at these other elements of equity through and through, who's participating in development programs, how are we doing to affect change in our communities, whether supplier diversity, increase of BIPOC talent and gender diversity in STEM, health inequities and disparities, what's the role we play in that? So it's a multitude of metrics that we actually sit together on a quarterly basis with the CEO for a full day. The CEO and his direct report sit with us for a full day every quarter, and we go through all of these metrics across the board to assess our progress.
Do you find it's necessary to address the issue of representation first, of making sure you get the right mix of people into the organization before you address maybe the cultural feeling, or is it the other way around, or do you have to address them both at the same time?
I love that you asked that question, Tom, because you actually do have to address them both at the same time. And it's good if you start our inclusion journey first. I'll tell you why. But I'm going to start with maybe defining diversity. So many people think about diversity and think that's about representation. That's about me counting the people in the room. Are we X this and are we Y that? But the reality of what diversity is really all about is cognitive diversity. It's that people from different backgrounds, experiences, and so forth think differently about any situation, about any problem, about anything that's in front of them. That cognitive diversity is what makes teams who are diverse smarter. It makes them not fall into something called groupthink. It makes them think differently. They see things differently, and so they ideate differently in order to create innovation and breakthrough. So if you have cognitive diversity, but you put that in a dish, in an environment where people are feeling frustrated, scared, lonely, feelings of exclusion, they're not feeling safe and empowered and valued and so forth, then you're not leveraging the cognitive diversity that you're working so hard to gain through diversity and representation in your actual environment. So it's important to have the environment that supports that the cognitive diversity is leveraged, or else you're just spinning a lot of wheels, creating more chaotic and troublesome environments than not. Because research actually shows that with diversity comes more chaos, comes more tension. If you're sitting around at a table with like-minded people and everybody's thinking the same, there's no friction because we're all thinking similarly. People are group thinking and just building on each other, But once you get in players who are openly expressing a completely different set of opinions, then friction happens. And it's in that friction that chaos or inclusion or lack thereof starts to play. So when you have an inclusion and diversity strategy or agenda, one of the things you're really trying to do is reduce that friction, that relational friction between teams, so that people can be free to engage in a way that's safe, that half-baked ideas can be shared, that people are pointing out, no matter where the levels of authority are on the team, they can point out issues that they think might be problematic. They can disagree with each other and it's safe. That is the only time when having diversity and inclusion leads to breakthroughs in innovation and creativity, and you leverage all the benefits that you get from this work.
Do you look at, I hadn't really thought about this until recently, though, with children, you tend to understand the different patterns of neural diversity. I mean, when we talk about diversity, we talk, I think in our minds, in our conversations, we think about gender and race and the color of your skin, but neural diversity is something that's, I think now being understood, just how we learn differently, how we work differently. Does that come into play? Is that factored into what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. It does, and it should. Although that path, I think most organizations are farther behind on than we kind of need to mature to. neurodiversity, generational diversity, style diversity. I like to explain to people all the time that every time you're in a room, there's introverts and extroverts. That alone is diversity right there. But it's all of those facets and all of those facets working together. And I think a lot of companies miss the point that your employees want this. Every employee, every human being wants an environment that is safe for them to be who they are. And if we're being realistic about who we are all having issues that we contend with, that we try to hide from those around us, lest we be judged, lest we be thought of as less than or not as competent or so forth. People who work in inclusion, diversity, and equity, we are taking on this charge and this challenge to try and dismantle organizationally the stigmas of being different, the stigmas of mental health or differently abled communities or people who have historically been challenged in different ways that need something different. Like equity is not equality. It's not giving the people the same thing. It's giving people what they need in order for them to thrive. That piece is where the magic of why this work matters and how you do it is where the complexity lies and where the challenge still is. But what I really like in this time and age, I was reading just yesterday, Tom, Larry Fink's latest. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, big, huge investor in Medtronic. And he writes a letter to CEOs every year. And he's a white heterosexual male, which I love when a white heterosexual male speaks to issues of equity and inclusion and so forth. And he says that it's a new era for CEOs. It's an era where your employees have a stronger and broader say in who you are as an employer. And that CEOs of this current time must and have to reckon with what matters to them must really matter to you. So aligning organizational purpose and values with what your employees' values and desired purpose for your organization, those things have to align now more than ever before. Your investors want to make sure that you're long-term sustainable, and your employees and future talent want to know that you care about things that they care about too. And if the pandemic has taught any of us anything, I think it's taught us a lot about empathy for each other. It's taught us a lot about what really matters to us as human beings. And we have discovered that that's not money and status. We have discovered that it's our well-being, it's our relations, it's our connection. Those are the things that are mattering to us more.
Very well said. Boy, I could talk and talk and talk about this topic. Talk about the report. You issued it recently. What were the findings? What is the second or the third report you've issued since you've been there? Probably the second?
It's actually the third report because Medtronic had a report prior to me, and now this is in our third year.
Okay. What were the findings?
I really look forward to actually hearing, as we get feedback around it, what people think, because that's the reason we put it out, to inspire and show our progress. But the theme for our report this year is zero barriers. We've built our philosophy in this space and in this business strategy around our role in dismantling the barriers that we know to exist for different populations wherever kind of they exist. So the theme is zero barriers. And that's what played into our strategy, our strategic pillars, and how we've designed our work. The report is designed to show people live examples of how our own employees have shown up in dismantling and alleviating those barriers, no matter where they're at. So you'll find stories in there about, a VP who went out and by herself built out an intern program for interns, people of color, in her own field in research, or how we have taken on a relationship with Thurgood Marshall College Fund to increase the number of interns and scholarships from historically Black colleges and universities. You'll find stories of how we started a supplier diversity program globally in our EMEA region and in South Africa, going beyond our supplier diversity work here in the United States. You'll see our progress on all of our representation goals. And that's a huge thing for companies to be as transparent as we're being about where they're at. It's not about have you arrived. It's about are you on the journey and in the arena fighting the good fight to make progress. So you'll see that we've set new 5-year goals for 45% women in management by our fiscal year 2026 and to be at 30% for ethnic diversity in management plus by that same time frame. And you'll see very transparently all of the metrics that we have around pay equity, how we're 100% on most of those metrics, how our organizational health survey scores are. It's a very transparent report about storytelling regarding our journey and how we are advancing this work a step at a time.
Great. And the final question, have you seen results today or changes today that you can tie to not only the improvements you've made, but the goals that you're set? You're having this conversation, you're sort of resetting or not Medtronic, but you're re-energizing this sort of focus on inclusiveness and diversity. Do you hear of anecdotally or do you have empirical evidence showing that there's a benefit to the organization, that people are innovating better or they're calling in sick fewer times? Anything today that you're sort of pointing to and saying, well, good, we have something concrete that's happened now and we can't wait to see what happens in the future?
Absolutely, Tom. Almost every metric we measure, we have gone up on. Actually, this year, we've already met our Women in Management Plus goal. We've already met our ethnic diversity in management goal. So in terms of like concrete, the representation is there. But in terms of the stories that we're hearing, the effect that we're having on people, the metrics of engagement, I'll give you a few examples on that. So we have found that our employees who are engaged in employee resource groups or our networks have almost double-digit increases in their engagement scores. Engagement is huge for organizations. So that's a big, big metric. But then we bring along what we are really proud of and I think is a huge motivator in this space, which is storytelling. We have an employee who is in our manufacturing facilities who'd been in her job for many, many years and never gotten a promotion. And through one of our projects that we're working on now called Multiple Pathways Initiative, we are taking a stance on removing the 4-year degree requirement in certain sectors of our jobs, in manufacturing and IT and so forth. And this employee, for the first time ever in her career, was promoted because we took away the 4-year degree requirement for that promotion right there. When you hear her tell her story about how proud she is of her company to do something like that and help her get out of generational poverty for her family, those are the things that when you hear that story, you know that you are making a difference every day in this work.
That's great. Well, I had high expectations coming into this conversation and you surpassed them. So thanks for your thoughts, for your question, and for joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely, Tom. It was my honor and appreciate you having me here today.
All right, let's wrap up this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Paul Grand, you are our guest. Once again, the deadline for filing to participate or to present at DeviceTalks Boston is March 31st. We'll just say midnight. We don't have to get too particular, right? We don't want to parse it down to that. Yeah.
Midnight. Just if it's April, it's too late. So sometime, folks, do it sometime in March, please.
And how can folks, well, they can apply at medtechinnovator.org. But if folks want to find you on social media, where are you? Where can they find you?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. They can find me mainly on LinkedIn. So just Paul Grand on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as Life Science VC. And that's mainly where you'd be able to find me. And MedTech Innovator also you can find on LinkedIn as MedTech Innovator. On Twitter, it's MedTech Awards. So that's where you'll find us on social media.
Fantastic. Chris Newmarker, where can folks find you out there in social media land?
Hey, I'm mostly on LinkedIn too. You can find me Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker, and I'm also on Twitter at Newmarker. So always happy to talk to people.
I am more on LinkedIn than I am on Twitter, but I am on Twitter, and I don't get a lot of Twitter love. I don't know. I get some likes here and there.
I give you Twitter
love.
Gives
me the Twitter love. Thank you. I try.
I like your tweets. I like your
I do more than just my Wordle score every day.
I see that your posts about your kids and the big dig and what it turned into and beautiful when exploring Boston. So great job. Keep posting.
I will, and how I will be listening to 80s and 90s music for the rest of my life, just because it gives me great comfort these days. But absolutely fantastic. Well, I am on Twitter at MedTech Tom. I am on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, Salemi. And folks, if you would be so kind as to share this podcast on your social media channels and connect to all three of us so we can follow that conversation. You can also, what can they do, Paul?
You can like, follow, and subscribe.
Very nice.
Woohoo, got it.
Nailed it.
There you
Stuck
go.
The landing. Fantastic. Yes.
Nice.
Like, follow, and or subscribe. And you will not miss an episode of the upcoming Device Talks Weekly podcast or our Stryker Talks podcast or our Intuitive Talks podcast. So, and you can also find Medtronic Talks. It has its own channel. You can subscribe there. I know we had the interview with Sally Saba in this episode, but we usually don't run those Medtronic conversations on this podcast. So please do make sure you subscribe to Medtronic Talks. And of course, you can find them all on DeviceTalks.com and also look for them on the individual company sites. Great. Well, once again, we have Device Talks Boston with the MedTech Innovator coming up on May 10th and 11th. If you want to save a little money, you have until midnight tonight, March 11th, to get our early.
Time flies by, Tom.
Oh my God! To get our early bird rate. And you'll save yourself $100 off the cost if you register today on March 11th. But if you've missed that window, you still have a great opportunity for savings. Use the code DTW25 and you'll save 25% off the price. And it's going to be a great show, Paul. I'm excited to have MedTech Innovator there.
You got to be there or be
That's
square.
For sure. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there with my whole team and 30 amazing companies, 60 of our partners and investors and others. We're all coming. So we're bringing 100 plus people to Device Talks. We're not messing around. We're excited. We're very excited, guys.
As are we. So
masks are coming off in Boston. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. No, we will. We are actually got an email about COVID protections or whether there'll be masks and proof of vaccination in Boston. At the moment, neither is required, but folks are encouraged to take whatever steps they want to do to be safe.
Exactly.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for tuning into this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Tune in next week. We'll have another great episode waiting for you.